Hey everyone, I'm Jay.
And I'm Sean.
And we watch movies.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do. Not all of them, though. There are occasionally one or two that we miss. And one or two that I missed is a documentary called Earthlings. Do you know about this documentary?
No, I don't.
Okay, so possibly we both missed it. It was 15 years ago, so don't beat yourself up too hard.
Oh, okay.
Why is it in the news lately, you may ask yourself?
I am asking that.
Well, to be honest, even the director, Sean Monson, was asking himself that. But actually, he had to take to the media to issue this statement. We do not cause terror to awaken people to terror. What happened to make this a necessary statement from a 15-year-old movie?
Yes, what happened?
Well, there was actually a pretty serious hostage situation in Ukraine recently. A man who I will not name was holding 13 people hostage, and he released a list of demands, including one that President Zelensky would sort of publicly endorse this documentary, Earthlings. There's no way to really explain the thoughts of someone who would be driven to do such an act, a crime, and think that you could possibly do good with it. It's hard to really get into that mindset and
Yeah, it is.
Understand how he thought this would work. Anyways, Earthlings is an animal rights documentary. So it's about the raising and slaughtering of animals for food. And the documentary stance is that it's not just bad for human health, although it is, but also for environmental health. Which is true. Yeah, I think cattle is one of the worst things that we do. Eating red meat, or not eating red meat, I guess I should say, could really reduce the stress put on the planet.
Definitely.
Cattle not only is responsible for methane in the atmosphere, but also it just takes up so much space.
It takes up tons of land.
Yes.
It ruins that land for anything else.
Yes.
It consumes massive amounts of energy to feed the cattle, to slaughter them, to bring them to market. So much.
Yeah. And because of the demands of our market, to feed all these people, back in the day, people didn't expect to get meat every day. It was a treat. But in our modern day capitalist kitchens, we do think we should have meat, not just every day, but in every meal.
Yep.
And with maybe a second meat sprinkled on top.
If you're lucky.
Sean. I'm looking at bacon.
Yeah.
So this is a problem, actually, and this has encouraged factory farms, right? We've gotten away from the small family-owned farms, and because really that way of life is not super profitable anymore.
Well, it's not as profitable.
Yeah.
So that's what happens.
That
big
is what
business
happens.
takes over and just takes efficiencies to extremes. Even if you have to cage some chickens and just make them disproportionately large so that they can't even function as chickens anymore.
No.
That's what we eat. It's not great to think about.
It's really not. And the 13 hostages were forced to screen it on a bus. And President Zelensky did, in fact, endorse the documentary on Facebook, though that post has since been taken down. The documentary is narrated by Joaquin Phoenix, who is a well-known animal rights activist and vegetarian in Hollywood. But nobody really imagined that this documentary, which is not asking anyone to be militant or certainly violent, would 15 years later, 15 years after its release, make headlines for this kind of thing. Anyways, after the movie was screened on that bus, the kidnapper, I guess we can call him, the hostage taker, surrendered to police. So it did end without any loss of life, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But it did get me thinking how sometimes movies do end up linked to crimes, sometimes even quite violent crimes. Even though studies have been done, because certainly movies and video games have been getting lots of blame for years and years, more than I was really even aware of. But fictional violence does not relate or correlate to real world violence. Sure, somebody who already has that mindset might seek those things out, but it is not encouraging anyone, it is not making anyone do things that they weren't going to do. So thank you, science, for being the voice of reason.
So sometimes you just need to hear things that make sense. Reaffirm your faith in people's ability to make decisions generally, although clearly some people make bad decisions. But it's not a video game's fault, and it's not Earthlings' fault.
Right. So let's start with The Dark Knight, because we have to start somewhere. And this one is still uncomfortable to talk about. It is kind of scary.
Absolutely.
Just because we could kind of all relate to this. So this one, and again, it's not fair, but it did become synonymous with Aurora, Colorado. A place you probably didn't hear about until someone went into the movie screening. It had basically just started, and he shot up the place. So this is scary because movie theaters are a dark place where people feel trapped. There really usually is only one way in and out, so it's easy to bottleneck. There's nowhere to go, there's nowhere to hide. So this really fed, I think, our fears, because we've all been that person in the theater seat. And this was really a bloody, bloody thing. There were 12 dead and 70 injured. And in part because he chose this particular movie, a Batman movie, and because he did refer to himself as the Joker, and he did booby-trap his apartment, you may remember.
I didn't remember that.
Yeah. So that is also kind of a calling card from a comic book villain. There was an uncomfortable
link there.
Did it ultimately affect the box office of this film?
No. I mean, hard to say. I diminished with how, that's one of the biggest movies of all time.
Yes, it did very well. But did it make people think twice?
Probably.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I'm sure people were nervous to go to any movie after that. I remember one person was killed, I believe, in a screening of Trainwreck, Amy Schumer's Trainwreck. And she was just convulsed with guilt somehow, even though obviously it has nothing to do with her, and the movie was seemingly picked at random. But just thinking about something that's like her creative baby, something she worked on and loved, being used in this way or linked to anything like this was just horrific. So it is, I think, a really sad thing when people use these things as an excuse. Because it's not. Right. So, Fight Club. Remember that one?
I remember Fight Club. I don't remember the controversy or the crime.
The thing about Fight Club is that it inspired fight clubs.
Oh, okay.
So lots of people went out and thought, this is something I should do. But I think the one that sticks out for most people was the one that was busted in 2015, where 2 New Jersey daycare workers were arrested for staging toddler fights.
No.
Toddler fights on Snapchat.
No way.
A baby fight club.
Oh my God, that's horrific.
It super is, yeah. It really is.
That's really, come on, like
I know.
that's so obscene.
Yeah, it is. I mean, people are gross.
Yeah,
And I mean, you don't need a movie to be gross.
no.
Leave the movie out of it, maybe. But yeah,
They're also a little late to the party there in
Well,
2015.
sure. I mean, there's always new people discovering movies. But also, you don't know that they relate to the party. They may have been doing
They may have been
this
doing it the whole time.
The whole time. That's
And
right.
then it was only Snapchat that really got them in trouble.
That's right. Well, that's the thing. How many people were watching and never said anything?
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose we can say that about a lot of things. But it is upsetting. It's very upsetting. Hard to go there. Okay, Scream.
Okay.
So was that kind of like the horror movies of your adolescence, or a little?
Yeah, it's kind of high school, university. It's definitely a big deal.
Okay. So, in 1998, 2 teenagers murdered Rita Castillo. The teenagers were in fact her son and her nephew. They murdered her to get money to fund a ghost face murder spree. So whether or not you've seen Scream, probably the ghost face mask, that white mask with the dark, that
Yeah,
the killer,
everyone should know
yes.
that. Yeah.
So they were wanting to emulate this kind of murder spree. They needed money to buy the masks, obviously, and voice changers.
Right. Just like the movie.
Right, and planned to kill a classmate who was selected because she looked like Drew Barrymore.
Who dies at the beginning of the movie.
Spoiler alert.
Well, if you don't know that by now.
Sean, there are kids who are just discovering your era of horror movies.
That's true. But I don't think they'd appreciate that. They'd be like, who's Drew Barrymore?
What?
Wouldn't they?
No,
They know who Drew Barrymore is?
they better.
Okay.
Check her out on Santa Clarita Diet on Netflix. I like that show quite a
It's
lot.
good.
Yes. How about Natural Born Killers?
Oh boy.
Yeah. I mean, nobody's gonna sit here apologizing for that movie. It is what it is. Maybe you like it and maybe you don't. But it was credited with an LSD-fueled crime spree, including armed robbery, the slaughtering of one man, and the shooting of another woman. So is this really the fault of the movie, or just people who are crazy on LSD?
Crazy people
I mean,
taking crazy drugs and
Yeah,
doing crazy
just
things.
because somebody who's not a good person also went to Blockbuster that week. I mean, it's really, I just find it really dangerous to be
No, that could have
blaming
been
things, you
a
know?
lot of movies.
Yes.
It was not the movie that made this person want to commit crimes, or these people, whoever it was.
Okay. So, do you remember, what was this? Let me see, 2002, I guess, the DC Sniper.
Yes, that was crazy.
That was crazy. That was scary even, like, for me, who's nowhere near this, but just, like, the idea of it.
Oh, yeah.
That this person is picking people off. And
Yeah.
it seemed like a lot. I don't even know really what the body count was, but
long
it felt...
time.
Yes.
They got a lot of people because they could not catch these two.
Yeah.
And it's not their fault. Like, they were just random targets, and then they just pack up and leave. And
Yes.
then they resurface later on.
And in some ways, I think the randomness of a crime like that is the scariest
It is a scary thing.
because you don't know how to keep yourself safe if anyone can be a target and the target is moving and seems to be motiveless.
Yeah.
You know, that the fear factor there ratchets right up.
Yep.
So when these people, the snipers, were eventually caught, they put in what is now dubbed a matrix defense.
Oh.
Yes. So this is part of their insanity plea, blaming this movie for inspiring their crimes. They were not the first or the last to make use of the Matrix defense, but it was most famously used by a woman who shot her landlady point blank, and she said her reason was because when you sleep, they drug you and take you somewhere else. So she blamed the landlady for infecting her dreams, you know, like they do in the Matrix.
Yes.
So, I mean, clearly this woman is having mental health issues.
Yes.
These mental health issues certainly seem to have been inspired by things she was watching or reading. But yeah, I mean, it is crazy to just think that this one movie has inspired this many lines of defense.
Yes, it is.
You know.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it is, I mean, the layer of reality and what is real, and clearly that is, it is a mind-bending movie in that way. And if you already have a tenuous grip on reality, I can see it.
Yeah.
It doesn't excuse your crime, so I don't think it should be a viable defense.
That's right. Well, we can say it worked, but clearly she does have mental health issues.
Clearly. And I hope she gets treatment for it, but that is not to excuse what she did.
Absolutely. And I think you and I, both in our lines of work, come across people who are paranoid.
Yes.
And certainly, you know, they pick up chatter from movies, they watch documentaries, shady YouTube videos, the works. And it always feels unnerving for me to hear that kind of stuff parroted back, because you really, I mean, that is almost a marker of somebody who really is struggling. Somebody who can't tell the difference between movies and real life anymore.
Yes, that's very true. Because the Matrix is only pretend.
That's right. So taking it all the way back to Taxi Driver. So John Hinckley Jr. was obsessed with Jodie Foster. Obsessed with. So she was actually very young in Taxi Driver. But he was obsessed with her after watching that movie. And so was writing her letters and, you know, being just one of those creepy, crazed, I don't even want to call them a fan at this point, but there was an obsession, a level of obsession there that had already reached uncomfortable levels. And because she was not responding to him, he decided he needed something big to grab her attention. And so he planned to assassinate President Reagan for her.
That's where I know that name. I didn't know the name.
That's the thing, is you may not have heard that that's apparently what inspired his crime. Was his obsession with Jodie Foster and wanting to do something attention-grabbing enough to get her interest. And he somehow believed that this was it. So Reagan lived, but he did wound him, and he did kill, I think, a Secret Service member, and also paralyzed the, what's that called? The press secretary, I guess, James Brady. So it was a terrible thing that came from just watching a movie and believing that the actor is the character in that movie and relating so much to that character and apparently to nothing else in life. You know, you don't have real friends. All you can do is project things onto this character who can't defend herself. And he transferred it over to Jodie Foster, the actress. And, you know, this whole thing snowballed from that. So to end on a really nice note.
Oh, good.
Someone who is obsessed with Queen of the Damned. So had watched this movie like 100 times. Loved this movie.
I'm not sure I remember this movie.
Okay, well, maybe it's best not to get into it then. So, was watching this movie with their BFF, and you know how friends are, how they know how to push your buttons. In fact, I remember when I was a kid, I could very easily poke my sister's buttons by threatening to change the channel on Hockey Night in Canada. She was a real hockey fan.
Still is.
Still is, for sure. A diehard Leafs fan, a diehard Matt Sundin fan. And if I grabbed the remote from her, she would cry. She was a teenage girl, so, you know, that may have had something to do with it. I think she's kind of got a lid on that now, although I have never attempted to grab the remote out of her hands recently, so, you know, I can't say for sure. So this friend was doing such a thing and was saying, you know, bad things about Akasha, the Queen of the Damned, who this guy was super duper obsessed with, and felt it was just horrible that somebody would say something bad. So, because Akasha had a special connection with him and was practically promising immortality to him if only he would murder his friend, bludgeoned this person with a hammer, stabbed them 42 times, then drank their blood and ate parts of their skull. And this was a friend. So, at what point did you break with reality?
A long time back.
I think so. If you have just been watching, and I mean, I have had favorite movies. I have certainly had repeated viewings of certain movies. I've never been so obsessed that even disparaging a character in the movie, I've never felt even mildly violent about it, let alone stabbing my friend 42 times.
Yeah, but you've also never thought that character was speaking to you and was going to give you immortality.
Also true. I mean, first of all, I wouldn't even want immortality.
Oh no, it's a really bad deal.
Overrated.
Think about it, people. Forever is too long.
It's too long, for sure. I mean, I know someone who would say 88 years is too long. Says it quite often. My mother's really tired of hearing it. But, I mean, guys,
he's got a point.
Movies are movies. They're just there to entertain you. You can like them, you can love them, but let's not
murder
let
people.
them inspire any violence. That's not what they're there for. They're not talking to you. No. They're really not.
They're not.
They're not. So yeah, that's how a 15-year-old documentary called Earthlings, narrated by Joaquin Phoenix, somehow became entitled into a Ukrainian hostage situation. Because people be crazy.
People be crazy.
Mm-hmm. So hopefully that guy is going directly to jail. Do not pass go. If you know other stories, feel free to share them down in the comments. We always like to hear what you're thinking. And thank you so much for watching. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.